There's so much to discuss about West Ham United right now. It's difficult to give all the issues justice in one video. I'm going to try. I'll try my best. There's firstly the potential talk about Nuno being sacked pretty imminently if we don't win against Nottingham Forest. Secondly, there's the rumour that Nuno has lost the dressing room because he is apparently distant and uncommunicative with some of the squad members. Guess it's not going to matter if he's going to get sacked. But anyway, thirdly, there's also the impact of what the rest of this transfer window might look like if Nuno were to be sacked, with suggestions that David Sullivan has stopped any further transfers for now. Well, that's not true, because by the time you watch this video on Monday morning, our latest signing, Valentin Taty Castellanos, may have already been announced. And fourthly, there's trying to make sense of the god-awful display against Wolverhampton Wanderers at the weekend after having seen the team play some pretty decent football recently, but not getting the results that we crave for. So let's start off with the potential of Nuno being sacked. If Nuno Espirito Santo doesn't lead West Ham United to a win against his former club Nottingham Forest on Tuesday evening, the board will apparently cut their losses, sack him, and find our third manager of the season to salvage what's left of it. Now, my understanding is that the board have already started looking at potential candidates, that they already started to sound out alternatives to Nuno. To be fair, that would be due diligence if they were to be doing that. I would expect that. But if they think that Slaven Bilic is the answer, then they must have very short memories and must be more deluded than I thought, because they sacked him from his post back in November 2017. And just to remind you why they did sack him back then, the board didn't think that this manager, this ex-manager, could keep us in the Premier League that season because we were 18th with just 9 points from 11 games. Now, as for Nuno, he only had 10 points from his first 11 games. So not much difference between that and Bilic's record when Bilic got sacked. And in total, as we know, Nuno has won just 2 games in 15 since he's been in charge. Now, the game against Nottingham Forest will be the 4th after the Man City defeat, in which we were meant to reset our season. The thinking was that we should have won maybe 3 of these 4 games, with possibly a draw as well. And they were all described as being 4 vital games to get ourselves out of the relegation zone. However, it hasn't quite worked out that way, with only 1 point gained in the last 3 games that we've played so far, with a defeat and a draw at home to Fulham and Brighton respectively, and then, of course, the heavy defeat to Wolves at the weekend. Can we get at least a win against Forest in order to bring us within a point of them? If we perform anything like we did against Wolves, then I say there's absolutely no chance. If Nuno doesn't succeed in getting the win that we desperately need, and if he is sacked as a result of it, it will have a domino effect on so many other things, not least, as I've already mentioned, our current transfer window. So what went wrong in the game against Wolves at the weekend? We were second best to a team who haven't won a Premier League game all season. And West Ham, of course, is the gift that keeps on giving. We had no fight, no stamina, no leadership, and really no clue. Nuno has managed to become the worst manager in our Premier League history, and that, I can tell you, has taken one almighty effort to do so, to claim that unwanted crown. Sure, we had a couple of injuries with Todibo and Paqueta missing, and I think it was Todibo's absence, ironically, that hurt us the most. The combination of Max Kilman and Dinos Mavropanos as our central defence partnership is absolutely woeful. Kilman is awful. I mean, Dinos is bad enough, but Kilman is just next level terrible. He simply is a waste of £40 million. And the Wolves fans have even stated that there was an air of relief when we paid them to having gone from their club. That shows the level of respect that they had for him at the time he was there. It's such a it was such a dismal performance against bottom of the league Wolves on Saturday. You know, they've been getting better, and they've considered themselves recently as being unlucky not to pick up more points from their recent games. But one could say that the same about West Ham, where we've seen fight and endeavour in our recent games, but those attributes were missing in abundance on Saturday. Fatigue, maybe? I've got to give it as an excuse. Do I believe it? Not really. We've had a lot of games in close succession, absolutely, and so have many other teams. So have all the other Premier League teams. And it can't be helped by the fact that our squad is so thin on quality that Nuno has to keep selecting the same players without offering any respite for them. Then there are the academy players who have been thrown in at the deep end. Ollie Scholes must be really glad that he's getting game time in the first team at the moment. But despite the young lad having had a decent game against Brighton, one can't help thinking that there's a lot of pressure on his young shoulders, and he should really be, in this stage of his career, a backup bench warmer rather than a starter in this poor West Ham side that's struggling for form. It's a big ask of the young player, and it's a big ask of any of the young players. But some seasoned pros really have to take a long, hard look at themselves as well. I've already mentioned how awful Dinos and Kilman were, but then so was our attack. Somerville has become much more frustrating on that left-hand side of West Ham's attack than I ever remember Saeed Benrahma ever having been. In fact, for me, Benrahma had way more end product than Somerville ever seems to have. And it's a shame because he came with a big reputation, Somerville, player of the season when he was in the championship before we signed him. And I remember how happy we were at the fact that we managed to get such a young prospect. There was a moment in the game against Wolves, some really good play by Somerville, which opened up a chance for him. But instead of shooting, he opted to pass again, and the chance was gone. And then we have Jared Bowen. Look, I don't want to be too hard on Bowen because he is an icon at West Ham. You know, he's given us everything that he possibly could have. But he seems to be carrying the worries of the world on his shoulders right now. And despite Bowen having come out in defiance in the post-match interview to say that he's man enough to take the criticism and he'll always try his best for the club, I still can't help myself thinking that the captain's armband is just too much of a burden on him in this challenging season, and it's showing in his poor performances. The truth is, Wolverhampton Wanderers just wanted the win much more than we did. Simple as that. They were sharper, brighter, looked fitter, looked up for the fight far more than we did, and they were rewarded with their 3-0 win, which was well deserved. One may argue that the penalty given against us was weak. Yeah, maybe. And it probably was. But they got themselves in that kind of position in order to be able to win that chance to, take a kick from the spot. Sure, there was a challenge on Freddie Potts as well, which didn't get rewarded with a penalty. But maybe the player's innocence in trying to stay on his feet might have gone against him and the ref waved play on. Look, no shots on target, no clean sheets, again. It told us all we need to know. We're poor in defence and we're poor in attack. So why did Nuno why didn't Nuno use our new signing? We went out of our way to sign Pablo in order to have him ready in time for the game against Wolves. He was registered in time. Well, according to some sources, despite the player having actually passed a thorough medical, he wasn't quite fit to play. But then why name him on the bench if that was the case? Let's hope we find fight in us on Tuesday night. And even if Paqueta isn't available, I truly hope Todibo will be. But I'm not so sure Todibo will be available as either. On Paqueta, Spurs are nowhere near signing him. So you can count that rumour out as well. It's gossip again, isn't it? Just to wind up the fan base. But if we can't raise our game against Nottingham Forest on Tuesday night, then the question of whether Nuno has lost the dressing room will again be asked, but this time even louder. Jacob Steinberg has suggested that there is disharmony in the dressing room where the players have lost faith in Nuno because he's meant to be quite cold and distant from the squad. Players are also questioning his tactics and his team selections. I guess we've done that as well. If that is true, if it's true that Nuno has lost the dressing room, then no matter how we set ourselves up on Tuesday night, we're going to lose. And perhaps Nuno will then be sacked. But do I believe in these Nuno rumours? I just don't know, to be honest. We heard exactly the same thing when David Moyes was here, that he lost the dressing room. We heard exactly the same thing about Lopetegui falling out with players. Then we heard exactly the same thing about Potter. And we all saw how he got rid of several outspoken, apparently, players from the squad in the summer. And now we're hearing similar stories about Nuno. So perhaps if Nuno isn't the problem, is there a theme going on here? Maybe some of these players have issue with authority. Who knows? For now, I'm taking this rumour with a pinch of salt. There may well be an element of truth in it, and we may find out if Nuno gets sacked. But going back to Forest on Tuesday night, if we lose and Nuno does get sacked, what then? What will happen with our transfer business then? As I said earlier, the rumour that Sullivan has halted transfer business for the moment sounds like a bit of shite stirring, to be honest with you. Taty Castellanos, or Valentin Castellanos, or Taty as he's known by, will be our latest signing, which makes it obvious that the transfer business is still happening. And if Nuno does get sacked, then the only difference will be that any new manager coming in will have a say and have an input in our transfer business going forward for the rest of January. But what of Pablo, who we signed from Gil Vicente, and Taty Castellanos from Lazio? Both players are said to be Nuno choices. And he has apparently insisted on having his own players brought into the club in order to address the imbalance of the squad that he keeps referring to. But I, along with many other West Ham fans, feel that any transfers are possibly too little too late anyway. But what if a new manager comes in and he turns around and says he doesn't want these players? I did a show the other day talking about how, we're meant to be moving away from managers having too much influence over squads. Of course, they've got to have some input, but the whole idea is meant to be about having a squad that doesn't matter what manager or what coach you bring in, they should be able to use the players available to them. So what's going to happen if Nuno does get sacked and we've got two of his players in the transfer window in the last week? Well, the new manager will again be faced with having to manage a total mishmash of a squad with now Nuno's input, as well as those players purchased by Potter, by Steiden, by Lopetegui, and by Moyes. Yet more chaos? Look, put aside the club issues for a moment, the fact that we are under an ownership that is not great for the club. Put that aside for one moment, and let's focus on what's going on with the squad itself. The lack of belief in this squad of players has to be addressed primarily by two individuals, Nuno off the pitch and Bowen on it. I don't want to become that type of fan who keeps screaming for managerial change when things don't go well. But we have to ask the serious question as to whether Nuno can really turn things around or not. 2 wins in 15 games suggests probably not. If players really are questioning Nuno's managerial approach and his coaching tactics, then the board should take action. Or are they going to allow Nuno to continue and hope for the best? Nuno has called the transfer shots so far. He has gotten rid of Fulkrug, Guilherme's already gone as well. I'm sure you've seen his message to the West Ham fans. And he's brought in Pablo and he's brought in Taty. And there is a strong suggestion that the third signing is going to be Charlie Creswell. But will Nuno be here long enough to oversee any further signings? Or will he be here long enough to actually see any of his new signings playing? Or are we already signing players for Nuno's replacement? All eyes are going to be on Tuesday night because the result in that game is likely to answer an awful lot of questions.